Well, I always wanted to have like a set studio place after like moving my gear around to different places so many times.
Was that in terms of like so you could start like living the engineer life, or was it like more of a band thing?
I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. I know I wanted to do it for like indefinitely.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to just do it in a way that was, I'm going to get a building, I'm going to have a lot of money and a business plan. I want to do it organically and like get people involved and like be a part of what's around me instead of just a thing that wants to capitalize on what's around me.
Right.
Like I wanted to actually change what was around me to work with me in a way where we both kind of work with each other, not just like jab some like commercial venture in the middle of an art scene and hope that it works with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What's up, everybody? You're listening to the Poorly Edited Podcast, the show that likes to put a spotlight on the most creative and interesting and talented and cool minds, the very best Pat and I can find.
Not very well.
Not very well.
Shoot, that's what it's about.
Yeah. Chandler wanted to be here today. He fell and couldn't get up, so he's not going to be able to make it.
It was a long fall.
Yeah, it was a long fall. One step. Today, we are not live on WXLV, the X. We are recording here at the Shards Recording Studio in Bethlehem. So, of course, today we have on Matt Molchany himself, the man behind the garage. How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you guys?
I'm fantastic.
The man behind the garage.
Behind the garage.
How are you?
I'm great.
Okay.
I'm more in the garage than anything else.
What did I say?
You said behind.
Yeah,
behind
I guess you're not very.
I mean, being inside is just
often.
being behind 1/4 of it, right?
What? Say that again. Run that past me again.
This is a building, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
4
Four
walls,
walls.
so you're
Okay.
behind,
So you're
one of the
behind one
walls.
of the
Yeah.
four walls.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
You're still kind of behind. You're behind a fourth of the garage.
I gotcha. That made sense to me.
I got an art
in some weird
degree,
way.
so that went right over my
You
head.
didn't have that yet.
Yeah, I
you're on
don't.
your way to an art degree.
Yeah, that's dragging on. Anyway, so we had you on back when we did that whole like Studio 11 sort of podcast thing. We had you and Josh on.
Yeah, around the kickoff.
Yeah, that was super cool. You were, if any of you don't know, Studio 11 is a recording studio that they built in the basement of the Bethlehem Public Library, and you were kind of the guy who sort of like spearheaded that. I don't know what your involvement is still now.
Well, it started off where I was like walking dogs, and Josh has the best job in the world. He can just duck out.
Yeah.
And like, oh, I see dogs. I'm going to go downstairs and like go meet dogs. And he's like, oh, hey, Matt, it's you and your dogs. Yeah. He's like, yeah, we started that studio thing that we talked about a year ago. And like the guy stopped doing it. I'm like, oh, I'll do it. And that was it. So I just went nuts then. Like they gave me a little bit of a budget and they already had some gear. I returned some gear. And then I started seeking donations from like, the community, basically, other musicians, like friends, whomever had anything to like throw down to it.
I'm sure Josh told you, but they're seeking more funding. So if you have anything you really want, make sure you, I don't know, get an Amazon wish list together. Or
Yeah.
something.
I should actually start thinking about that.
I don't know. That was that whole thing has been really cool. I've been able to meet a bunch of people there, and it just seems like it's getting utilized pretty well. And it's still, I'm pretty sure it's still like in a soft opening kind of phase still. So I'm really excited to see kind of how that grows, and hopefully it can be just like this thing that just enables people, whether they just use it as like a practice space or to learn. Or I've even like booked time to go there by myself. Like I didn't even have anybody, which felt really lame. But I just went and just like poked around with the stuff.
To be alone for a little bit.
Yeah, well,
clear your head.
Yeah, not really, but I'm sure it is quiet, so you could do that there if you wanted to. But I just wanted.
I made sure of that.
Yeah.
That's such a cool thing to make open to the community, though, because it's like a big step from like practicing in your basement is to just having something that you made that sounds nice.
It's free use. I don't know if I mentioned that.
Yeah, it's a free use recording studio.
Yeah,
and like you said, it's open to the community, and that brings a lot of different people together too. A lot of like interesting pairings are happening from it. Like Josh will send me a text every week with some weird stuff that's going on. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what should be there for.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Lots of different people who otherwise wouldn't have been able to go hang out in a spot like that can opt to if they want to. They can even test out if that's their thing. Right. Then maybe never do it again and pursue art or
Which is so important because I had to do that with college and I spent a lot of money to do that. And
exactly.
Like, thankfully that worked out, but like I went in not thinking I was going to, like, I had no idea that was going to be a good idea. But so, like, to be able to do that for free and to be around that kind of stuff and that environment that people awesome. Speaking of awesome, we just had a show with Brandon Wonder, and what he said about you was something along the lines of like genius, and I want to be around him for the rest of my life, kind of stuff. I don't know how that makes you feel. Probably weird.
Sounds like a proposal.
Blushing, I think. I was going to say, I guess I should say yes.
Yeah.
If you're watching Brandon, I do.
Yeah, I think he's single, so.
We've had one marriage in the podcast. We can have another.
We have, yeah.
You have?
So, sort of. Apparently, it's really easy to become ordained.
Yeah,
I married somebody already.
Yeah, okay.
I was like, so I just kind of talk and then you're married?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
I'm a wizard.
Yeah.
This is amazing. We're supposed to be marrying people.
You're supposed to marry me and my girlfriend, like as a joke or whatever, but then...
You found out you were actually married?
Well, everybody in the room said I do, so I think we're all actually married.
Yeah.
So...
I should stop doing that.
But yeah, Brandon's awesome.
Oh yeah, great dude.
He definitely, like Seamus from Tape Swap, he's a person who, when I get together with them, we do nothing but just dream bigger and bigger together and enable each other to think of things that we wouldn't have otherwise.
Right.
And maybe imagine too much.
Yeah,
we want to do all the things we talk about.
But here's the thing, though. Like, and I've spent more time with Brandon than I have with you and Seamus. But like when I'm around him and he's talking about that stuff, I'm like, yeah, you're going to do it. Like,
it never seems more possible.
Well, that's the attitude you have to have.
I have no doubt that he's going to do everything that he wants to, and that's incredible. Because like, if you find me another person that is trying to make Allentown and like the Lehigh Valley a better place, not just to be a creative, but as a person, like I want to meet them. Because we need more people like that.
Absolutely.
But that was 2 weeks ago. I don't actually care about Brandon anymore. Thank you so much for having us here in this place. Every time I come here, it's just such a unique experience. It kind of actually reminds me of the Alternative Gallery. I can't stop talking about Brandon Wonder.
I was about to accidentally describe it the same way I described the Alternative Gallery, where like when I walk in here, it's just like it feels more creative. I don't know if that was like the intention with all like the calculated clutter, but like...
Yeah, I mean,
it really comes across,
half intention and half that's just the nature of like the people who work out of here. It started off like this was completely empty when I got it. There was nothing in here whatsoever. Like there was no art, obviously no musical equipment of any kind. It was a workspace that was a machine shop. And they made the machines.
Oh right, I remember you talking about that.
I think I was telling you about that.
Isn't there like a piece of that somewhere?
There's a part
in
of like a crane system.
Okay.
That it rotates 180 degrees, so it'll hit the wall right over here, and it'll go all the way back above the gas heater and tuck into the corner. They would like float big machines from place to place. And they worked on snowflake machines. Okay. They made things that made snowflakes, which is hilarious and wonderful.
Yeah,
but this place was devoid of everything. I started bringing amps in here. I rented it on my own at first, and then my band kind of started to chip in, and then I moved my recording gear in, and then people from the now defunct Wildflower Cafe, they gave me a piano and some art and a couple spare chairs. It was like everyone started to like help me out to make it a home.
So does that make Studio 11 easier? Because I'm sure Josh was like, "What's the plan?" And you're like, "I've already done it."
You're right. I didn't even think of that.
I've already accidentally built the studio before.
Well, I built a lot of semi-studios in like the 2000s too. Like,
talk about that, because that's not something I knew much about. I wanted to know, like we talked a little bit about the origins of Shards last time you were on, but I want to know the deep lore here.
The deep lore is that I dropped out of college.
Nice. Yeah.
and I dropped out because I was a gigging musician when I was 19.
Right.
And so every day at 5 p.m. a van would pick me up 5-6 days a week, and I'd go play until 2 a.m.
That's awesome.
Get home at like 3 or 4 a.m. And it was hard to do college, and I started a commercial recording studio, like pretty much on my own in Allentown, in like a fallout shelter, the basement floor. There was another recording studio on the next floor, a MIDI studio. So I had all my stuff pretty much growing up, that I accumulated little pieces of gear and stuff like that. I got all that together. I figured out how to like paint stuff and seal floors and build a control room and all that stuff. So I made a space there, and like my bandmates helped a little bit here and there. We put that together. Then that band disbanded and I moved to California. And
I didn't know that.
So I was in LA ish area for like 7 or so years.
Wow.
And I was never too permanently in a spot there.
What were you doing there?
I moved out there because my band, a label, wanted to work with the band I was in at the time.
Okay.
And we were kind of like, let's just see what it's like. It seems like there's a good music scene for what we do out there.
And what year was that roughly?
2001.
Okay,
what kind of band were you in?
It was like a power pop, Weezery kind of like indie rock.
Can I listen to some of that stuff?
Yeah, I could show you something.
Awesome.
It was kind of grungy too. Yeah. But it was cool, and I got to record at some like really nice studios too. Like this,
there was a lot of cool stuff happening in that area around that time.
The band Ozma was like a big one.
I've heard of them.
Like Nerf Herder.
I think I've heard you bring them up.
Really?
Or maybe Seamus or someone. Yeah.
Rilo Kiley wasn't like those bands, but they were just a band you'd run into at a show back then. They weren't like this big thing.
Sure.
Jenny Lewis wasn't this big thing yet, kind of thing. So I was out there and like around all these people and like doing music on that level. It's like seeing them work was like, oh wow, this is amazing out here. Like, you know, I got to really like see people who were like really going for it.
Did it feel like more real than Allentown?
Not in so this is the funny thing. A lot of people think that LA is like this like kind of fake place, which it totally can be if you go to where those people are.
Sure.
But like every band I was in kind of gravitated towards stuff that was more on like the DIY tip. Now, granted, Rilo Kiley blew up and everything, but there are a lot of bands that we met in 2001, 2002 that we stayed friends with the members and their new bands, their next band, their friend's band, and we all like played shows together. And like we kind of had this little community. And in between those shows, we'd go out and I'd tour the country and book like DIY tours and stuff like that. So we were playing places where we met more people like that. So there are pockets of that everywhere, and we happen to just find it out there. But it was really cool to see, like, it was like a really bustling scene at the time for that kind of music and everything. Yeah.
So what led you back here to start doing this sort of thing?
Well, I always wanted to have like a set studio place after like moving my gear around to different places so many times.
Was that in terms of like, so you could start like living the engineer life, or was it like more of a band thing?
I didn't know what I wanted to do with it.
Yeah.
I know I wanted to do it for like indefinitely.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to just do it in a way that was, I'm going to get a building, I'm going to have a lot of money and a business plan. I want to do it organically and like get people involved and like be a part of what's around me instead of just a thing that wants to capitalize on what's around me.
Right.
Like I wanted to actually change what was around me to work with me in a way where we both kind of work with each other, not just like jab some like commercial venture in the middle of an art scene and hope that it works with it. Yeah. You know what I mean?
That sounds like it was hard though, like unless you had a good support system around you. Yeah, no, I mean, it was definitely hard. The first year I was back here, I didn't like have a set place to live. I like couch top with my sister, my parents, my grandma. Yeah. I turned her basement into a recording studio while I got this set up. You were probably that guy. Is like, I really want to help him out. He needs a place to stay, but he might accidentally turn my basement into a recording studio. He might accidentally. You just come home one day like, it's a studio. She was awesome, actually. She would like come downstairs like whistling like, oh, it sounds good. Like, tell me lies. Yeah.
So when you first got into it, was it like because you wanted to? Or was it like necessity where like you're in a band, you want to record some stuff, you decide to like DIY it yourself, and they just kind of like wound up doing that? Somewhat. I mean, it was really like a respite at first because I was like literally 8 or 9 years old when I started doing stuff, and I had like a little 4-track, and I figured out how to hook a MIDI controller keyboard thing to that, and I started learning how to like program stuff and all kinds of weird stuff like that because I was a super dork and I needed to escape everything else and just wasn't a big people thing because I was a little chubby. It wasn't a fun time in my life, so I honed in on music, and that became like my salvation basically. So it started off like that kind of thing. I remember you said you had an experience where you were very young, where I can't remember if you were just like allowed to be in an area and just like turn some knobs and stuff. Oh, yeah. It was like a moment for you. Between 4th grade and 5th grade, and then 6th grade and 7th grade, and in 6th grade, I did like a couple programs where we actually went to NAC and like to Northampton Community College. Right, yeah, okay. And we got to work with Mario Serra and like put together like an actual show. Now, the one time it was like we worked with people who were there helping run the stuff and whatever. But in 6th grade, we actually ran everything. Like I made a theme song at home. That's crazy that you were able to do that. Yeah, it was 6th grade. That's cool. That's such an amazing opportunity. Sounds like a little bit like Girls Rock too. What do you mean? Like High Valley Girls Rock? Oh, yeah. Well, it was just a thing with the school, school program thing with Nichman. Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't have anything like that when I was... I got lucky, I guess. Young. Yeah. That's awesome.
So was there kind of a moment where I guess maybe things started to pick up and then you did all of a sudden start approaching it from like more of a business standpoint? You're like, well, this is something I love and it seems like it's picking up traction. Maybe I can do something with
There are a
this.
bunch of moments like that. I mean, when I was 19, I treated it like that because my whole income was music. It was either gigging or recording.
Yeah.
Then I kind of went more casual again and like went back to, I'm just going to record my bands. I did an album with somebody and made some money in 2001 and it did okay. And then like, I was like, that's cool. I'll live off that for a minute. And then like, I just kind of went back to doing it casually. I always had like temp jobs and stuff like that too. Yeah. It wasn't until a bunch of like self-made albums for my bands and a couple for other people that by the end of the 2000s, I started doing it like a little more professionally. Right. But it still wasn't enough to like, I couldn't survive off it basically. Yeah. I can get close to it, but I was still a little scary. Yeah. So I did like a social work job and I made like no money doing that, but it was like the best job in the world. I got to work with people with mental illness every day. It was great. I miss it like crazy. But I did that for 5 years and made like no money and I had to leave. And I left for this totally crappy painting job. Like no offense to people who paint, like ain't for me. Yeah. And I've done like lots of weird jobs. That one I couldn't take. And I did it for 6 months and like we made a ton of money, like more money than I've seen working in LA at like good office jobs and stuff like that. And I took all of that and quit and then just started doing it full time. Right. So that was when it was like, okay, I just have this money. It seems like there's enough work. I always gave it the professionalism. Like it was something that was like, helping me exist, but it took having that little bit of money saved up and I was like, I'm just going to try and see what happens.
There's something special about an awful job that makes you like,
that's what did it.
I can't do anything like this anymore.
I languished at that really awesome job where I made no money, like the social work job. Yeah. I kind of just made everything work, did band, did some recordings, did some mastering, kind of floated, but like when it came down to it, I needed some really crappy
Real quick,
job.
I just noticed the shirt. Yeah, absolutely love that band.
Oh yeah,
one of my
great band.
One of my favorite bands in the Valley, easily.
Yeah.
What's your view on the local music scene?
It's always something special. Like that's the thing. Like it's always been something special here. A few years ago, this writer for Bandcamp did like a little piece on stuff and like around here. And he said, and he took the words out of my mouth. He said, bands around here come fully realized because they're not trying to ride some wave and like just copy the next big thing. They just stay here and like work away and work away and work away.
About this place that does that to these bands?
It's hard to say. I mean, it could be just the people that are here, the fact that there's like 1,000 colleges around and just a different like mingling of people. It's spread out, but there's a lot of people here. Like it's almost the size of Pittsburgh, but we're just spread over like a bigger area. Yeah. It's a funny thing. I don't know. The air quality's terrible. We're all a little brain dead. So we slow down a little bit, get creative.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, like, what maybe your perspective was on people who, have this dream of doing this same sort of thing, but it seems like you have had such a unique approach and journey to this point that I don't even know if you have advice for that sort of thing. Right. Yeah.
I mean, I always tell people, like I have a friend in Philly who he's looking to start a space or to like start doing it professionally. And I just said, just keep your head down and just keep doing it. Like take work at first, like say yes to lots of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and hone your craft, like practice, just keep doing it. If you do good work and you're cool, like that'll travel out there and it'll come back to you.
Right.
Like that's the one, like, piece of advice that's most applicable to everybody.
Right.
There are lots of little weird details.
Sure. There's a hard step in there though, where you're good enough to do it and say no to some jobs and just accept some, but it's also kind of scary to start doing that. Like you don't want to establish a reputation or anything, and you just want to like, you have to make that leap at some point.
Yeah,
like, I'm good enough to say no to this and just accept the jobs I want, and I can make enough money.
It's hard because it feels like you're being like condescending or something, and I'm like not remotely that person. I want to help everybody. Yeah. But there are times where like if I'm vying for some job and it's like the third time I'm emailing an example, and I'm like, just go to the other place. Like, it's fine. I don't care. Like it seems like you're like that better if you're like scrutinizing that hard. So go, it's fine. And I did that the first and second time in like the last year. Yeah. I mean, pretty much the rest of the time, I'm like, yeah, let's try it. Let's see if it works.
Yeah.
Because I'll try anything. Like, you know, I would love to give it a shot.
That's what's so exciting about this. You know what I mean? Because anything can walk into that door, and you have like there's so much uniqueness and so many different kind of music that can come out of doing this sort of stuff, and it's different every time. And that's what's so much fun about it. And what's
it's
so
fun for me too.
about it.
Like in the last 3 years, I've done like a children's album with someone who was like, she was like a folk punk pioneer in like the early 90s. Like her name's Brenda Kahn. You should actually check her out. She's awesome. But we did a children's album here.
Yeah.
I played drums on. I'm like, all right.
Was it folk punk children's album? Or
it was like it was folky indie rock kind of thing.
Yeah.
She's like a mom now, and so she's like kind of into that kind of thing. She's less the punk. She has a really great song. It's like what is it? It's like your brain on drugs or something like that. Look it up because the video is great.
Okay.
It's like making fun of the whole cracking eggs and this is your brain on drugs thing. It's hilarious.
Okay.
Her lyrics are awesome.
Yeah.
She like toured with Bob Dylan too. It's crazy.
Oh,
but I
wow.
did an album with her, and then I'm doing like a Tile album the next month, and it's like the most brutal, heavy, very LV kind of thing you could ever record. It couldn't be more dissonant if you heard it next to each other.
Right.
But like somehow I kind of like thrive in there. You know what I mean? It feels good to have that kind of like dissonance and change hats all the time.
And I feel like there's a lot of respect between musicians too. Like there's not a like between like people who are fans of certain kind of music that kind of disrespect other kinds of music. But as a musician, I don't see a lot of like calling out other musicians, even if they're in like completely different genres. Like they're never like talked down on that.
Oh yeah. I think like some of the best bands around here, when you talk to the people in those bands, they're into everything. Like Ray from Tile, like he loves the most unexpected stuff.
That's something I've noticed coming into this area from living somewhere else where everybody was just like into rock or into rap or like whatever. But like to me, there's a lot more diversity here in terms of what people like.
Even if there's an overall leaning towards heavy music here, still so many people, especially the people who I find are the coolest.
We're from Antarctica, who has a huge following here. You know what I mean? Like that's not what you might expect out of this town.
No, that's what I was so psyched about them.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, this is like it's really cool to hear a band like this.
Yeah, I first heard them at the Ice House show actually from like a year ago, around this time actually, and I had heard about them, and I finally saw them. I'm like, wow, so cool, such a cool band.
Yeah, and I heard them too before that because they sent me some stuff they recorded before, and it was like, I didn't know how to take it because it was kind of like. But we can get into the philosophy behind the recording stuff now if you want to. But like,
for sure.
It sounded very like I wanted to work with them because I wanted to bring out what was unique about them, and like I feel like that was kind of quelled on the recording they did before. And no disservice to whomever did that or whatever. Yeah. That's just like how some places work. They want to replace every drum hit. They want to make everything dead on the metronome all the time, which is totally fine. You can do that all day long, but don't let it kill your vibe. Like, don't let it like ruin who you are.
Yeah, we had a friend who's like, he got a free recording somewhere, and then he found out they don't do live drum, like they don't mic drums. They use a what am I thinking of here? Like they program all their drums. Yeah, they program all their drums. Like that, so he just like he didn't take that free session just because he wanted to have actual drums. He don't have program drums, and I mean that's just kind of how it is. Like if you're like realizing an artistic vision, you don't want to like go halfway. And like,
or have someone tell you how you should be doing it. Like that's a weird thing to hear from somebody is like,
especially in an art form that's so subjtive and there's no right or wrong
that's
answer.
How I would feel like the biggest idiot acting like there's only one way to do something. Like, I don't know if it doesn't like compute with me, I guess. Because I mean, there's so many ways to try anything, and like half the time with recording, like the aha moments have been from doing something real messed up that like absolutely worked. I was like, oh shoot, that actually was better than
that's the wrong mic.
Doing that the right way. Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know.
How do you what's like your prep for going into a session? Do you like listen to some of the like other bands?
Do a bunch of push-ups.
Just get pumped. And also like, how do you make that decision with We're From Antarctica where you're like, I need to like, because you were able to recognize that there was something that was subdued, and then you're like, I need to bring that out. What is that process like? How I mean, I guess it's just from having a trained ear.
Yeah, and it's like half unconscious too. Like you see a band live, and then you hear what they sounded like recorded. You can tell that something happened. Yeah. That like it made them sound different than live. Not that live is like the only. They're awesome live. Yeah. That's the thing. Like why waste that?
Yeah.
Like them live is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Like there's all this interplay. Like sometimes, same with Run from the Radio, James Ritchie like kind of gets psyched when it comes to a chorus, and he'll play ahead of the beat. He'll play on, but he'll play ahead of the beat. I've actually never talked to him about this. So here you go, man. Here's your secret's out. I'm inside your brain. No, but he gets psyched. He plays ahead of the beat. Like he's not off. Like it's still happening in time, but now he's a little bit ahead of it.
Yeah.
And that's him being a human being.
Yeah.
And that's such a horrible thing to waste, I think.
Right.
If it's not like egregious and like messing up the whole vibe, and it's not like sounding like they're tripping over themselves, like if it's doing that, then like we should like absolutely tighten that up a little bit. But it sounds like a thing happened. It sounds like an energy shift of some sort. And like those are the things that makes albums like wonderful and real and human. Yeah. And like we're all human.
Right.
I feel like, why like try and pretend we're not?
Yeah.
I feel like it's like some kind of superpower, because I never would have noticed that. But like having like a trained ear and being like a sound technician, whatever, what's it called?
Engineer, technician.
Sound engineer.
What I do?
Yeah.
What's it called?
Would you like to give yourself a title right now?
I mean, I'm a homie.
So you can say, okay.
I'm just a sound homie. I'm a sound bud.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like, I don't know, that's so cool. I'm sure like, do you ever listen to like an album and you're like, let me look at the like engineer behind this and look up the other stuff they've done and then listen to that? So it's like never even entered my mind.
And sometimes it doesn't deliver. Sometimes they really did slap their thing on somebody, but it worked for that.
Right.
Like there's some stuff that like Pinkerton by Weezer, that album.
Just listened to that last night for the first time in a long time. Actually.
Oh, awesome. I might have to do that soon.
Yeah.
Some of the people involved with that, I've listened to other stuff.
Who was involved with that? Just
Jack Joseph.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Is like the mix engineer for that. Joe Barisi did a lot of the engineering, and he's done like Queens of the Stone Age and like lots of heavy stuff too.
Yeah. Definitely reminiscent of other stuff going on during that time. I was picking up.
But what he's done with other bands are a little more typical sounding when he works with them.
Okay.
For whatever reason, what it did to Weezer sounded
a weird
bizarre.
Freaking album, man. So
yeah, I mean, like they're just a couple distortion pedal into distortion pedal into distortion pedal into amp and like just ratty guitar sounds and stuff like that. Like there are albums he did where he didn't really kind of do that same thing again, and he just got cool guitar sounds, which I'm all for. I mean, it's cool to listen to like Queens of the Stone Age guitar sounds are awesome, but like. It wasn't quite the same. Like I expected him to be this like genius moment, and it was like, no, he has cool stuff, and he has like really dope amps.
And if it works, it works.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah,
and sometimes you can take a set approach to something, and it'll like actually work, but sometimes it'll just sit there.
Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with Eric Valentine. He just put up a bunch. Well, he's been putting up a bunch of just sort of breakdowns of the mixes he's worked on in the past. So that's really cool to sit there.
What has he done? The name sounds familiar.
I'm trying to think. I've seen like 4 of them, and of course I can't remember them off the top of my head. He's worked with All American Rejects. He's worked with one of the more recent Weezer albums.
I feel like I was just talking to somebody about. He came up in conversation.
I haven't listened to any of the new Weezer stuff, but I know there's a song called Mexican Fender on one of their new albums. And I know he worked on that album, but being able to like watch a video like that where he's just tearing apart everything he did to make it was very, very cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
You see how sometimes it's like a real subtle move that makes something sound, it makes everything sound drastically different.
Brings everything together. I know there was a moment in a different song he was working on where there was like a cymbal crash right before the chorus, and he just cut off the beginning crash. So you just had like the whoosh, and it was just like, because it wasn't supposed to be this big overbearing thing, it's like chorus. It was just supposed to be more like chill.
He just kind of rolled in.
And it was just everything.
Zach, you're probably thinking the 50 Shades Free soundtrack that he mixed.
Could be. Did he really mix that? That's great.
It also says Chris Cornell, but...
That's very funny.
Is that... When did Chris Cornell die? Was that last
year? A few years ago.
A couple years ago,
like 2 years ago?
Because it says Chris Cornell.
No, it was more than that. Yeah.
On here it says Chris Cornell. It's like a self-titled thing, and it was like 2018. So I guess he might have recorded some stuff that wasn't released.
It was right after. Do you know Banshee?
Yeah.
It was like right after we did.
Was it really?
Stuff? Because Aiden, the singer from Banshee, came in like the next week and recorded a Chris Cornell song.
Oh wow!
Just to kind of like, I don't even know if he released it. I think he really looked up to him. I guess so he just wanted to do that.
Yeah, those are great dudes. I love them.
Yeah.
Especially Chad. I had a couple classes with Chad. It was a pleasure.
Oh yeah,
Great guy.
yeah. You had classes with Chad?
Yep.
Like last year or a couple years ago?
2 years ago at this
Because we were
point.
doing I was doing the Banshee album, first one around then, and we were doing like drum lessons and stuff.
Yeah.
And he'd hang out
Oh,
and
cool.
like shadow me and
That's
ask
awesome.
questions. So it was probably the same time you were having
We
the class.
we ran into him at Lit, I think, the coffee place.
Did you?
It's like a couple blocks away.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we heard about this place. It's like we saw
is
Chad
that-
there.
Did you come
That's the
over? Did you
origin.
come over that day or like
I
soon
don't-
thereafter? Or
I
something
think it was
like
definitely
that?
soon thereafter. I'm not sure if it was that day.
Well, I remember when we recorded a tape swap sessions, he like walked in right before because he just drove
Oh, that's
by
right. He
and
just
saw
like
you.
parked his
so
car
you
in the
might be
alley
thinking
and
of
blocked
that,
traffic and
Yeah.
came in. And then we heard a honk. I'm like, all right, you should probably go. But good to see you.
Of course, Chad was probably like, "Oh yeah, you're right." And then,
Oh yeah. He's great. Those guys are great.
yeah.
So have you ever recorded like an album or something and you're like, there's something this band needs that I'm not facilitating? Has that ever happened? Or like, have you most of the time you've been like, I pretty much they got out of this what?
I mean, there
they
are
should get out
times
of it?
where if like they're happy, I'm happy.
Yeah.
And maybe I would do it a little differently, but like,
Is it hard sometimes to like figure out where you have to draw the line of I'm not the producer here, or maybe you are, and like where is that like a weird thing to?
you know,
feel
I never know
sometimes?
if I am or not until I just
Yeah.
start making suggestion after suggestion
Right.
and they don't say no. So then I know I kind of am.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, it usually gets to a point where like you hit a wall with it sometimes where it's
Sure.
like, okay, I think that that's about all I really need to do. And they kind of like roll with it.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Sometimes it's just, they want constant like feedback from everybody and not just me. Like,
Right.
you know, they'll be emailing stuff to friends around the country or something like that
Yeah.
and checking that out with, you know, and seeing if there's anything they're hearing that
Right.
something's lacking. But generally when I get to the end of it, and if I'm okay with it, it means it definitely passed like my
Right.
my rigorous mental
Right.
breakdown and
Right.
everything. Because I definitely don't have an easy time putting stuff out there with something left in that I really
Right.
don't like.
Yeah.
Unless I like. Usually I'll have them kind of like explain to me
Right.
what something is. If it's really hard for me to get, I'll be like, what do you like about what that does? And then if they have a reason and it's not just like laziness or something like that, I'm like, okay, I see. And
Sure.
then I just never think about it again.
Right.
I can kind of just block it off and it's
Okay.
cool. It's good
Yeah.
to go.
So, like in regards to that, and then just mixes in general, how do you know when you're done? Then, especially when it's like I said, it's so subjective
Mm-hmm.
as an art form. It is like where. Is it that checklist that you were kind of talking about, or like passing it in your head or whatever? Or is there like...
I mean, there's always a
how do you-
checklist.
Sure.
You know, I mean, it's not like a tangible thing that I go through. I don't open up a doc.
It's not an
and I'm
actual
like,
checklist, and you're like,
But, like,
the drums sound fat.
Yeah,
It's like,
like do these things as a pair work together?
Right.
Do these things as a pair work
Yeah.
together? Like, and then again, are they happy with it at this
Yeah.
point? And if they're happy, and anything that's in there that I'm weird with or whatever, like if I can let it go, then it's good to go.
Yeah.
But there were times where they were fine and I was not, and I'm like, you probably won't hear the difference between this, but I'll send you A and B.
Yeah.
B is the one I kept working on, and they're like, whatever. I think B sounds better actually. I don't know what it is. I'm like, perfect. Okay,
Yes.
good. Let's just go with that.
yeah,
It's
well,
not important.
that's kind of your job. That's kind of the
Yeah,
responsibility at that point. You know what I mean?
It's things that they're gonna get replayed over and over again,
Yeah.
hopefully, and it's their artwork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you know,
And then they're like, there's that one finger symbol he added in there. That's crazy or something.
I just feel like unlike like movies or whatever, where there's like an off scene, if there's like a weird part of a song, I feel like it's way less likely that people are gonna re-listen to it or anything.
like something
like
that doesn't
it's-
feel like it belongs there or something like that.
Whereas like if it's like a movie and there's like that scene that you're like, I kind of like, once you're in it, you're like, I don't really care about this part. So you're on your phone for a couple minutes or whatever. But for a song, it's like, I feel like there's like more of a commitment, or I don't know if it's more of a commitment almost, but it's like, I guess a smaller mistake even takes up more of the song, like a percentage of it. Cause
Yeah,
it's
and
like,
you don't want to lose people too.
yeah.
Yeah. Which
Like-
is so easy
Yeah.
with the song.
Yeah. I mean, you want it to have momentum
Yeah.
the whole way through, and sometimes you have to remember that like someone's lyrics might be impressive, but like, who knows if someone's going to be listening to lyrics?
Yeah.
Like I might like freak out on some song and just like love the lyrics the whole way through, and like my girlfriend can't even listen to like
Yeah.
30 seconds of it. She's like, cool, it's the same thing over and over again. I'm like,
I-
listen to the lyrics.
I know, like me personally, I definitely like can really get behind like awesome lyrics and stuff like that. But like that's at the bottom of the list of the things that I want to be good in. The
And for
song.
for some people it is.
You know?
For
And
me,
not that I
sometimes
would
it's
never
crucial.
want that neglected or anything like that at all. Like I said, I can absolutely like awesome lyrics, great.
Mm-hmm.
But like yeah, for me, it's just like at the bottom.
Or like rad music could get ruined by really terrible lyrics sometimes. Like,
and in that case, it would be it's
way
different,
out there,
kind of depending on genre.
Yeah, like look at like Sigur Rós. Like they are pretty much making up sounds with their mouth the whole time. But the music is so. Have you heard of them ever?
No.
It's like this Icelandic band, and they're just beautiful sound. They're gorgeous. They just sound like a iceberg slowly cracking into a pristine ocean while birds are flying around. It's amazing and like peaceful, and it's really cool, but they don't really have a lot of lyrics. And I think he even made up his like own language for some of the songs.
Okay. That's
and
crazy.
it doesn't really make sense. It just sounds perfect over top of it.
Yeah.
And it's just funny. It's conveying something from him, and he only understands it because it's his language, but you still get that somehow. Like it's almost like it's doing what good lyrics do, but without it actually having to make lyrical sense to the listener.
That's very interesting.
It's just another layer to the madness of how subjective everything is.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they pull it off. I mean, I would listen to them for like, hours straight, and I have no idea what they're saying. It could be hate speech. I don't know.
I hope not.
I hope not.
That'd be really awkward.
I did my research. It's not, but Sigur Rós is not a hate band. They're beautiful.
It's our official statement on that.
Have you ever been like on the fence about that? Have you ever listened to a band and you're like, is this, are they, which side are they on? Because there's an artist I listen to called Jay Retard, which is like, first of all, the last name, I'm like, this is kind of weird.
That's iffy. Yeah.
It's like from the 90s. So it's like, and he's like a punk. I got like the sense that he wasn't trying to offend anybody. It was more like the Germs, where they take something that most people would not look at as positive, and they like name themselves that. So more that kind of thing.
They kind of break the mores about it, kind of.
That kind of thing. So it was like, at first glance, it might seem like kind of weird, and he's like trying to offend. I mean, I guess he probably was trying to offend some people, just because that's kind of the nature of punk. But
Sure.
it's, I don't know. I did like a deep dive. I'm like, I don't want to like support anybody who's like weird about that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, we've like with Tape Swap, and my band, we've like refused to play shows with people who have had any inkling of like hate speech. There's a band from Allentown that like we just would refuse to play with, and no one goes to see them, nor do they really play, so it's not even worth mentioning their name. So I won't.
Right. Yeah.
It's pointless. Yeah, nothing I've recorded really ever. I don't think I like attract people like that really.
Yeah. Yeah.
There might have been iffy moments where I might have thought too hard into something, but then it proved itself nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's probably because of, the kind of environment that you have here and the atmosphere that's cultivated, you know what I mean? So something that I was hoping I would be able to ask, and I can now that you talked about like how far back you go in terms of engineering and just the industry in general. I was wondering how like streaming and the digital age has affected being an engineer, and maybe even the way that it's recorded and produced.
Well, thankfully, like
And I
it
don't
hasn't
necessarily.
affected.
I don't mean like tape versus analog.
It seems like it affected studios that kind of went all in and did the whole thing I was talking about earlier, where you have like the $1 million business plan and like a lot of investors and that kind of thing. A lot of studios on the West Coast kind of consolidated and became like under whatever group. So there would be like a studio in LA, one in Marin County by San Francisco, one in Sacramento, and they're all managed by one company who pays out engineers to work out of there.
Right.
So there's like a management system because they're not making so much money anymore.
Right.
This podcast is sponsored by Relevant, a location-based mobile network personalized by your interests. Customize your newsfeed to consolidate all the information you care about all in one place to quickly and easily find what's relevant to you. Find out what's going on in your local area and reach your community from the palm of your hand. Relevant is available on iOS and coming soon to Android. Be the first to know with Relevant.
One thing I noticed was that like there's some studios our own. They had to like not charge as much and make package deals and make smaller packages too, like block schedules and stuff like that. There's a few studios in like Northern California, Southern California that are all managed by this one. It's called like Single Fin or One Fin Group or something like that. So they have like an actual like managerial side that just tries to do everything they can to keep these studios full for even 4-hour blocks. So in the old days when there was more money, and this is what I'm getting at, there was more money for artists because of CD sales.
Right. Yeah.
And that's not the thing. Like, you make a lot less from streaming. You make more money from playing live shows. So you can't just rely on album sales anymore, like the mechanical side of it and all that. So they're just trying to fill their time.
Yeah.
And most of these bigger studios went all in, and like they hooked it up with more than they needed, and bigger spaces than they needed, and more stuff than they needed, and more staff than they needed, etc. I mean, it's just kind of like anything that capitalism has touched has done that at some point.
Right. Sure.
I also try and keep myself not in that style of capitalism.
Yeah.
And we kind of touched on that earlier with me wanting to be a part of the community and not just a thing that tries to take from it.
Yeah.
But
well, and that's something that you do so much. I mean, you're everywhere. We seem to run into you everywhere. Like even at just like when we went to go see Queen City, and Brandon brought this up the other day where he was like, you literally saved the show because like last minute nothing decided to work.
Yeah, that was cool.
And you just had to like take the bull by the horns and figure out how to do this.
Yeah, I'm
thing.
ripping apart this dude's setup a half hour before a documentary is about to be screened, and there's
like,
thousands of watts going to things that can blow up. It was like cutting the wrong wire and the whole place goes.
That's amazing. So like we're just in line for popcorn, and we're like, oh look, it's Matt. Of course he would be here. And you were just like, hey, we're trying to fix everything by. And we're like, well, yeah, of course he is. What else could he be doing right
I gotta
here?
stop doing that.
Yeah.
But I did it.
I have two questions about that, actually. One, and you were just touching on this, like how important do you think to your success was being that guy who was involved with so many projects, whether it be Tape Swap and the other things that he has going on in all the different locations, or like having that connection with Brandon Wonder? How big, how important was it for you to be doing those things to help like cultivate your success?
Well, it's important because it makes me feel good about what I do.
Okay.
Number one, like it really makes me like feel like I'm helping. Like I don't want to feel like I'm just like just taking people's money and then like not kicking out a product or something like that. Like I really want to like help everything. That's why when I first moved back here, I started this to be just a hive, a musical hive, and like a sanctuary. Basically.
Because it wasn't this place where you like, hey, I want to buy some studio time. It was just kind of
it started off very
practice space kind
like
of,
that, and like I mean, like people chipped in and paid for it and everything, but it wasn't like I tried to make a lot of money off of it or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, being there is really important in anything. You know what I mean? Being there and present and part of something and active in how you interact with everything. Like I don't like half-assed interactions and thoughts and conversations and stuff like that. I'm terrible at small talk. Like if I could talk like this all day with people, my voice, which is already starting to go, would be gone. It'd be shot.
No, I'm the same way. I'm like 0 or 60. Not even nothing in between. It's just like nothing or this. So,
Which, I mean, I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but whatever.
You're doing fine.
I like getting into deeper conversations and stuff like that. But being there is huge, and I think I met a lot of great people because of that. I think maybe people can't help but know someone who's doing that stuff then too. And I think a big part of like what kind of seals the deal with like when you're going to work at a studio or work with somebody is kind of getting a feel for the person and what they're about. And like I kind of put it out there, so it's an avenue to get myself out there so they know who I am.
Right.
And if that's someone they want to work with, then they can. Yeah,
we had another engineer on recently who had left the game to start teaching, but one of the biggest things he was talking about because we had asked him like, you know, what's something that bands should be doing when they're trying to figure out where they want to go? And he's like, you got to get to know the guy who's going to be running the session. You got to figure out whether or not you're going to be able to jive with them or not. So I hear you.
That's important.
My other question about the Queen City thing was, as you said, you were sending thousands of volts into things that could explode. How do you navigate that sort of situation? Like, how do you be that last line of defense? And you have to do it in the studio all the time. Things go wrong all the time. It's just the nature of
don't
the
let
beast.
anyone know that you're, like, crapping your pants. Keep calm. Definitely, like, because you can't think if you're, like, worried. And, like, what's the worst that's going to happen? It doesn't work. And it's not like... I mean, there's redos in things. I mean, it would have been really not cool if that stuff didn't work. But like, when we won, it wasn't my stuff, so I didn't feel too terrible if it didn't work. It was absolutely last minute that I had to go figure that out.
It wasn't even your fault.
It wasn't my fault. It wasn't. Either way, still, I want something to work for something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Especially
I don't want other people to feel like that. But yeah, I mean, you can't be analytical if you're like losing your mind. You just got to stay calm. Don't even think about the worst case, because like even if it comes and it happens, it's going to be gone then. Yeah. You still have something to deal with.
Something I've said on the show before, like when you're in that sort of environment, like stuff's going wrong like that, it's hard, but you can't stress about the problem. You have to stress about the solution.
Exactly.
So,
plus you're not going to make like, you couldn't really make things worse in that situation. Like you're pretty much only making things better, even if it was like marginally. Like I don't think you could have like made that a worse situation than it already was.
Maybe you could have blown something up,
maybe.
Which would have been cool.
I actually could have. That's what I'm saying. Like I was looking at that gear, like, wow, this has a lot of potential to destroy something right now.
Dude, for the ending, you should have just pushed everything up. Just go with a bang.
Send that off really, really well.
Yeah.
But yeah, you guys just like stay calm and just see your way through it. And like you said, don't get bogged down by that. There's a problem in front of you. Just remember it can work.
Yeah.
It's in there somewhere.
Yeah.
There's some way to configure whatever that will make it okay.
And
that happens here.
We're doing the shard session here, and like the one guitarist headstock broke, so it was like he couldn't play his guitar anymore, and you were immediately walking over to your guitars, and like, oh, what's it like? What tone are you going for? Like, what do you want on it? And you like immediately had a like solution. Like it was so quick.
Oh yeah. I mean, I have enough stuff to where something of theirs goes weird, or even if two mics die, I have something that's like close enough that I can make it work.
Do you think that an important quality to have in an engineer is somebody who kind of thrives under that high stress?
Yeah, I think so.
Environment.
Yeah, you can be someone who doesn't. I mean, if you're not, then you are in a place like we're talking about where you have staff who are fixing things for you constantly or something like that. Whereas I do 90% of the fixing of stuff on my own.
Yeah.
And I have a friend who plays drums with my band too, Tim, and he's built me gear. And
do you not play drums in that band?
Sometimes.
Okay.
I do. So yeah, it depends on what we're doing. Sometimes I do.
I just assumed.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, I play guitar and sing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rad.
Yeah, it's a different thing.
Okay.
But yeah, like I have someone who helps with stuff here and there, but he's not like my hired tech guy. I buy him a pizza and we'll stay up all night and do stuff, and then it's done.
The way it should be.
Yeah.
Something I kind of jumped the gun a little bit. I wanted to kind of go back to like the whole like how things maybe have changed since music and music listening has gone a different direction. I wanted to talk a little bit about like the loudness wars kind of thing, and like your take on that. I guess you should explain that a little bit, and then maybe how that's changed since things have moved towards streaming. Because it seems, well, I'll let you go a little bit first just to kind of explain.
Yeah, well, so aside from like the budgetary side of things that have changed and how there's like not as much money on average. I mean, there's still lots of money in some places.
Yeah.
It's all there. And a lot in the middle. Yeah, so the loudness wars started in the late 90s with CDs and limiting the level of music going onto CD so that when you put it in your car or a radio station spun it, that it would sound louder and more impressive than everything else.
Because louder is better.
Apparently, but you also can't listen to something that loud for too long because if you look at the waveform, it looks like a square wave, which is distortion, so you're basically putting on left, right, and listening to distortion in your ears for the duration of an album, which it causes ear fatigue, and I don't particularly like
which is
the
a
sound
huge
of that.
thing.
Yeah, no, it's a real thing. Like after 8 hours here, I tell everybody, this mix, I don't even know what I'm hearing anymore.
Yeah.
Like I could have heard that kick drum so many times that I can't hear kick drums anymore.
Yeah.
Like I don't.
That was such a crazy thing for me to try to wrap my head around when I first started.
Like fatigue?
Because I hadn't experienced anything like that before. Like, what do you mean I can't keep going? But it's real. Like, you're just going to do it harm if you keep going after a certain point.
It depends on what you're working on. Like, I can run a session for 10 hours. And like, sometimes that 10th hour, like last night, it was like the 9th hour or something like that. The band I was working with did the song that they kind of didn't even really know, but it was their own song.
Yeah.
They barely had it together yet, but then I was like, just try it. It's cool. Like, we're good. They did it. The mix was probably terrible, but like, they nailed it.
Yeah.
And we're going to use that for their album and whatever. So I'm still capable of like hanging out and making music at that point. Like, I'd rather be doing nothing else. But as far as like critical listening and mixing and stuff like that, like there's a point where you got to really like step back and know that it's diminishing returns.
Yep.
Like I start off making like, I kind of go like moderately bold moves, chill out and just make sure everything's cool, broad strokes. Because if I do something big at the end and I think it's rad, like it's usually
not.
terrible.
It's definitely bad.
I learned that since I was a kid because I would like make a cassette and think it's done, and then like go outside, sit on my front porch and listen to it. I don't know why I couldn't listen in my basement. Listen to it like, oh my God, that's terrible.
Yeah.
I should come back tomorrow. That's pointless. But yeah, that's a real thing, and that can be caused by listening to something with that like loud average volume for too long.
Yeah.
So like by the time you listen to a 30-minute, 40-minute album and the thing's squashed and super loud, it's kind of like not fun anymore.
Right.
Your ear likes dynamics. I mean, just
Yes.
think of like a live show. Some of the most effective things when I see a band live, and I can tell it works with the crowd too, is when bands do stuff where they like shut it down for a second and like, like a little breath and then like throw it back at you. And those are the things that like kind of almost scare you a little bit in a way, but like captivate you.
Yeah.
And that's devoid.
Yeah.
Like when it comes to super loud CDs and stuff like that.
And to kind of, and you can expand on this more, but to break it down a little bit, you know, what you're doing to achieve getting it louder and louder is basically just squashing it, and you're starting to lose the dynamics of it. Because I think essentially
limiting
just
the
kind of
dynamic
like run out
range.
of ones and zeros is essentially what happens.
You're pushing it up towards the last.
Yeah.
The number for a CD is 65,536 individual samples, or not samples, bits. You are pushing it towards that last, like, 65,535 and keeping it as close to that as possible. So the resolution's technically as high as you can get for a CD at that point, but at the cost of it sounding like crap.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, a lot of people did that. There was actually backlash in the early 2000s. It was some stuff Rick Rubin did. Like people who are like super fans of like the Chili Peppers were like actually writing letters into the labels saying like, this is too loud, this sounds like hell, like it's distorting on my hi-fi system and stuff like that.
Right.
Like, I guess audiophiles like the Chili Peppers, who would have thought? But
And that's slap
there's some
bass.
backlash, but like still lots of albums throughout the 2000s were done like that. Since streaming started taking over, they started using a different format for loudness. It's called LUFS. And things that are made to be very loud actually are getting turned down. So it's dissuading people from doing that. So if you really crush something, like what you would normally do for a CD, so we'll make up some just imaginary numbers to make it easy. Say I'm crushing something to -8, but they want to see -14. They're going to pull it back by 6 now.
Right.
And you still lose the dynamics.
You still lose the dynamics, right?
You get the loss of dynamics because you crushed it, and then
But now it's just quieter.
quiet.
Right.
So
It's just like double ass. Like
Right.
it just, it's good. It's gonna like keep
Right.
people from like
Right.
sending garbage.
Well, and this
out.
is the weird thing though, is because like there's still people who are like, awesome, it's over, like we don't have to worry about it anymore. But there's still people who are like, no, that's bullshit. And make it loud.
Yeah, I mean, I still make CDs pretty crisp.
Yeah.
But not like some. Like
Yeah.
I hover around a pretty like nice mark where like CDs hot, but not too hot. The stuff for streaming, I actually kind of like make it on the more chill side.
Right.
Like I use pretty minimal processing so I can actually keep, because every processor you add, depending on compression or a saturation thing, whatever, they all kind of contribute to it becoming just kind of this mound of sound.
Yeah.
And the more stuff you pile on there, the less like dynamic range it has, the
Right.
less breadth it has. So I kind of go like minimalist, start to use things like dumping it on a tape machine instead of going through like 5 different plugins. Just do that and see what happens.
Yeah.
And like almost do that. And if it does something weird, that's not great, deal with it as a way to have to just deal with something and get a different sound out of it. Like, the tape made it sound kind of like soft now. Okay, so I'm going to give it some air with this. And what that did was I didn't compress it. I didn't do some EQing in the box. I sent it to a thing that just added something. And now I'm adding a little air in the box. And I end up with this product that's like actually like nice sounding and like a different avenue. Like I forced myself to take a different route.
Right.
And I'm not like using a bunch of things that kind of like shave off transients, kind of like get rid of some of the dynamics that the band kind of gave it inherently too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to approach it, but it's really cool to be able to like listen to something on Spotify and know that it's not being like crushed anymore.
Yeah.
A lot of engineers are like mastering engineers, and that's not my main thing. I do it for a lot of people because they don't know who to go to, or I'll just do it because I want them to be able to afford their project.
Yeah.
A lot of people are doing stuff involving less of like the brick wall limiting and just crushing it to getting it to a place that sounds good, using some little like tricks to kind of demuddy everything and just go with that.
Yep.
It's more just a simple like cleansing of the audio anymore.
Do you think mastering has changed because of that?
Yeah, definitely.
And I also wanted to talk about, like, because anytime you talk about this sort of stuff with people who just aren't in that world, they're like, there doesn't seem to be this understanding of exactly what the distinction is between mixing and mastering. And it isn't necessarily like a different kind of checklist sort of thing. It is kind of ambiguous and weird. So if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of room for education on both of those things, and the loudness wars too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, you know, someone might think because their thing is playing back, one thing's louder than another means that it was made to be louder.
Yeah.
Same with the vinyl. That's another medium that I had to master too, where I'm like, nah, see, if I crush it and make it loud, it's not going to be loud though. It's a similar thing. They can't fit that high of an amplitude on physically on those grooves in the vinyl. So you actually have to send something that's on the lower side and then let their final mastering engineer deal with it. Anyway, mastering is pretty much the process where you're finalizing either a single song or group of songs to sound its best in a bunch of spots. I think it's most important to make something sound good pretty much everywhere, or as best as it can sound everywhere.
What do you mean by everywhere? Like different...
A phone, a laptop,
okay.
crappy speakers, good speakers, car. I test everywhere. Like, I listen on everything to see.
I remember we came in once and you had like daisy chain stuff out to Mitchell's car to play Run from the Radio.
Yeah, if someone has a car with an aux in, we'll sit in their car sometimes and just check it out there to make sure, because that's like the best subwoofer.
Yeah.
I hate mixing with a subwoofer. It's out of phase. It rumbles and feels weird. It's just a tactile kind of things are just off. Like, it feels weird. But I like hearing it in a car where you would listen. Like, I'm used to that. Everyone's used to that. I'd rather just double check it there. But yeah, like making it sound good everywhere. Sometimes like there's a phase where I remember a lot of phones, 500, 600 hertz was like real raunchy sounding on phones. So I'd have to like dip that out. And then like a year later, it seemed like on average, the phones that the people were listening to it on,
crazy.
Like that would make it actually stand out.
Yeah.
I add a lot of weird stuff to like, I add more mids to bass than I ever had. Because of that, I wanted to be able to stand out everywhere. And it's not like, I'm not talking like 10 dB of mids now, but it's like I'll maybe duplicate a bass track and grit one out so it's just crunchy and weird sounding. That
just
might
blend
grab your ear a little bit more than just the regular track. Make it weird so it grabs your ear, and then accentuate the frequencies that you think will actually like pick up on a smaller thing like that, and tuck it in behind the main one. So like someone A and B'd it, like A without it, B with it, like B would just sound like a shade different. But if your phone like sounds better with that in it, like it kind of amplifies that little thing. That's a big part of it, is like listening and figuring out, are there any frequencies that are a little overwhelming too at times?
Yeah.
And working with those, because if you have something that's a little too peaky, a little too loud at any moment, and I'm not talking about like in one specific sound, but when stuff, it usually happens when like a guitar and a voice and like one other thing overlap in a spot, and the mix might be fine, but for one moment they might like constructively interfere, like rogue waves. They go over each other, and because there's two like things, they double. You cause this little peak, and if you're in like a car where that peak is a mess and really like active, that's going to sound like quadruple now. So you want to kind of like limit those a little bit and work with them. Sometimes I won't even use an actual plug-in with a setting. I'll actually automate EQ to just go away for a little second. Or a tom hit where like the base of it sticks out a little too much, but it works in the mix. But I'll just notch that out for a second and then let it go the rest of it. That might be the only EQ I do, only active EQ I do for the whole thing, aside from some like sweetening kind of stuff. But the whole mission is to make it sound good everywhere.
So do you ever, when you're mixing, do you ever take into account mastering, or is it like you mix it and then after that's done, then you master it?
That's the thing, because there are definitely things in the mixing process that you're doing that, or rather, like, you know, you describe that stuff and you're like, well, yeah, if you know what you're doing, that's kind of some of the stuff that you're doing while you're mixing as well. And that's why it's like weird and ambiguous, and it's hard to give like a really solid answer of what it is or isn't.
It can be. I mean, one of the best mastering engineers, Heba Kadri, she did the last Bjork album. It started off, she was Bjork's like mastering engineer for it, and this is kind of what got Heba big. She's awesome. You can like check out her work and stuff. I recommend it. She started off like just kind of being the mastering engineer at the end of it on the album, but then Bjork liked what she did with that and how that was able to have that big of an effect that she sent her like the stems, like the actual printed tracks for everything, and she ended up kind of mixing and mastering. She didn't have like the individual tracks to EQ again or anything like that. She didn't have the compression. The effects were on already. They were wet. They had all like their sound embedded already, but she had the final say, like where the vocals, the drum, say it was broken up to vocals, drums, bassy stuff, mid-rangey stuff, stringy stuff, whatever. She had that final say for maybe 8 stereo tracks to kind of make them work together.
Okay.
So some mastering engineers can still kind of be doing mixing, and it seems like that's happening more now too, especially when you want to, like, there's so many different, people still listen to CDs.
Yeah.
People are still listening to stuff in cars, but people are streaming stuff in their cars. People still live in houses. People still have laptops. So there's just only more than ever like ways to listen, and people are still listening on vinyl. So like the old ways people listen is still happening, and then there's new ways. So there's just more stuff to have to deal with.
How it seems to me like getting it to be perfect across all platforms like that is very difficult.
Yeah.
Is that something that's even possible?
To get it perfect?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I shouldn't say perfect because, of course,
If
that's
it was
not
like,
true. But
the sound of birds, maybe.
yeah,
Nailed it. They sound great everywhere.
It's great.
It sounds like a bird.
just turned it down 1 dB.
I mean, I think it's possible.
I was just wondering, like,
for it
what's
to
your
be-
approach to that? Where do you draw the line where it's like, you know what, it's good at an 8 of the 9
Once
of these?
once it got its best at its worst.
Sure.
Like once the worst sounding thing that gives me the most trouble sounds its best, and
Yeah.
it didn't compromise anything
Right.
else, that's when it's
Right.
pretty much good
Right.
to go.
I got you.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you don't like prioritize like vinyl though, because that's probably like the
Well, I
thing
mean,
that's
I do if I have to master to it. Yeah. I mean, like when I do, I go nuts, and like there's real specific stuff you have to do. You need to make the bass not as stereo, almost completely make the bass mono from a certain frequency down, so the needle doesn't like jump off with a kick hit, or
That's
like
crazy.
if a tom's panned left and you hit the tom, it's like boo, it'll knock the needle that
That's
way.
awesome.
It'll physically knock a
That
needle.
is awesome.
So you have to mono sum all that
Have
stuff.
you ever,
That's
like,
crazy.
Have you ever done that then? That'd be like an interesting, like, to master something on like a vinyl for it to do weird stuff.
For it to
like
do weird
that?
stuff on
Yeah.
the vinyl? Yeah, that'd be really cool.
That sounds impossible to try to do.
I think I joked about that with Tyler. Like, should I try and make this so that the engineer hates me? Like, send them like a little like thing in the beginning. It's like, but also their equipment isn't crazy expensive.
Yeah,
right.
And there's only like 12 places with some of the equipment, and 15 of the units around that do like the first part of like the vinyl mastering.
Yeah.
So I don't want to break any of their stuff.
Yeah.
And stuff's expensive.
Unfortunately, we're starting to run out of time here.
I want to.
Go,
quick,
please.
I
No,
wanna-
go ahead. Please. I don't want to
I
stop.
like to hear some like, who are some people that I should go home and like look up to listen to music they've like mixed and mastered from like I mean like any time period, but like any all-star mixing and mastering people
Even-
that I
even
could,
just, like, your
learn
favorite
from.
Oh yeah,
mix or your
like Steve
favorite
Albini
album.
is great. He's kind of a salty jerk, which is awesome. Rob Schnapf, he did like a Foo Fighters album, stuff with Beck, Elliott Smith.
I think I've heard of him.
Yeah, Rob Schnapf is great. I worked with a band who, while I was here, I worked with somebody else back in LA, and I was getting mixes right off of his soundboard, like at the end of each day, and it was like amazing to hear their raw stuff and then hear what he would do with this gear. It made me like obsessed about getting a mixing board again. You know,
Yeah.
it was a total rabbit hole. But what he does is really cool. He creates a lot of layers by sending stuff out, like sub mixes of things out, and printing it back into his computer.
Yeah.
And then working kind of like with the Heba Kadri thing with Bjork, he just then creates for himself these stem mixes that he has to just
That's
work
kind of
with
like
that.
really old school, like on old like 8 tracks.
It's a lot of
or something, or
commitment.
4 tracks. You know.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
A lot of people. I'm all for like the million track count stuff and getting
Yeah.
really creative and wild, but there really is something to crafting a sound that you commit to and working with it.
Yeah.
I have like an 8-track cassette
heard that
recorder I've
before
been
from other
recording
people, too.
with here and there. I did an album with a band called Early Bloom, and they broke up the second it was done because the one dude moved or whatever, but we did it all on a cassette thing, and we could do 4 tracks at a time. So day 1, where we tracked drums, all the 2 tracks, guitar, and then a scratch vocal, took that out, put that, like, did a new vocal, then redid a guitar, and then started layering over that. And it's like we were stuck with
Yeah.
what we had, and we had
Yeah.
to make it work somehow,
Yeah.
like when I was a kid. And that's what Rob Schnapf does. It's really cool. Really funny story with that, like, they sent me this one mix, and it was pretty much done. And I was like, it sounds like something's like a little pitchy right there though. So like I was in this email chain and they asked him like, how hard would it be to set up to change this? And he wrote, no. I was like, hell yeah, Rob. That's right. You know what? Tell me to shut up. That's awesome. Like, cause it's done. It really is done. He just told him no.
Yeah.
I mean, he charges a decent amount for what he does too. He could have milked him, but he was like, you're done. That's fine. Just, it's done. Walk away from it. He kind of just told him to walk away.
That's so funny.
And when Rob Schnapps tells you to do that, you probably listen, I guess. He's done a lot of good stuff. Yeah, but check out Steve Albini, Rob Schnapp. I mean, that alone will give you tons of listening. So I'd start with those two for different reasons.
Pat, do you have like a favorite mix on an album? Like, is there any album you've listened to? You're like,
I don't know.
It's juicy.
I mean, a lot of Nirvana stuff is like really.
Yeah, In Utero is awesome.
Yeah, it's like huge.
That was Steve
I love
Albini.
it. Really? Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, then I'll definitely check him out. So yeah,
It's not my favorite Daft Punk album, but I love how Random Access Memories is
I
mixed.
wonder if that's the one. I have the one compressor they used in that, and I haven't busted it out because I haven't recorded anything remotely like that.
Yeah.
But it's apparently like the sound of a lot of that kind of style music from Europe was this one like trashy compressor that everybody hates on like message boards about stuff like that. That's awesome. You brought that up.
Of course, that would be like the key.
So I had to have it.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
And then also, I definitely want to talk about kind of your future moving forward and the different projects that you have going on, because you're actually kind of taking a step away from this building for a little bit.
Oh yeah. In actually maybe even sooner than March now, because since I talked to Amherst about this, I have a band from Chicago now that I might be doing something with.
Right.
So I kind of have like, I was thinking like a year ago, like, wow, I'm doing some stuff. Like a band from Pittsburgh came to me. There's three bands from Brooklyn. Yeah, no, four different things from Brooklyn where I either recorded it here, went to them to record, or I play drums on stuff and email it to them. Like they'll send me tracks, all session drum, then email it to them. They drop it in their project. They send me the mix, I master it, then I send it back. So there's kind of this little like network developing. Then I was like, man, like what if I like did kind of like my DIY tours when in my 20s, but it's for recording. So like, wow, like there's enough spots where I kind of know people,
right? And
like that'd be a good start to start with people I know and like see if it could branch off from there. But around the time of South by Southwest this year, I think my girlfriend April and I are going to go to Austin and maybe play a couple shows for South by with our band. But
cool.
On the way there and LA and back, I'm going to hit North Carolina, Chicago, Southern California, and like record some bands that I'm friends with.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to do like a recording tour.
Cool.
That sounds sweet.
I don't know if that's a thing people do. That sounds awesome.
I thought I was like, oh, no one did that really, so I'm going to do it.
So are you going to be then operating like entirely out of those studios that you know, or is there kind of like, are you going to have to do any work like on a
back
laptop?
of a van
like
recording stuff?
No, it might. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to bring my gear with me. Not all of this stuff, but I
wanted to know what like your remote setup was going to be like.
It's the mics I have here can all fit in like a telescope box that I have.
Yeah.
I can fit that stuff no problem, and the rest of it's like a desktop computer that's that big and a converter that's that big for 8 channels, because I don't really need more than 8 channels for what I'm doing for the most part. If we do, we'd go to a studio someplace.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I'm going to be turning people's like outhouses and guest bedrooms or bedroom or living room into a studio wherever I go.
That sounds
That's
sweet.
crazy.
Which is what I did in my 20s anyway with my bands and stuff like that.
You should record some of that too. I'm sure that'll be interesting.
That's another thing.
I totally watched like a video.
Yeah.
No,
Brandon was talking about coming along for some of that maybe and like filming it. He actually blocked off some time.
Okay.
I feed him that energy of I'm going to do it. So plan for it basically.
Hell yeah.
I also had the idea too to do some maybe because Brandon and I did a video shoot here for Mike Lorenz and the Witherbees. It's like it's like a jazzy kind of like outfit. And we did a live video here where they played like 3 or 4 songs live in the room. Brandon had a couple cameras. I did the audio, and then
awesome. Yeah,
and so I did a couple of things like that. Another band's going to do one. So I thought, why don't we like take that show on the road too? I was like, that's around when people start doing their submissions for the Tiny Desk concert series.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, what if we just teamed up and charged like a flat rate and knocked out a bunch of those for people like in a cool way? Like,
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, go to them and like help them film those or whatever. Like, give them a good video. Like it's
Yeah.
probably their first video ever if they're doing
Yeah.
that or something like that.
Yeah.
So
I love Tiny Desk.
Any last words, Pat, before you walk the plank out of this garage? I don't want to leave. It's been a
don't
blast. We'll have to have you back on after you do that tour because I guarantee there's going to be an hour's worth of awesome
yeah.
Yeah,
stories.
yeah.
There's
That'll
stuff
be
I
cool.
wanted to talk about we didn't get to, but it's whatever.
Yeah.
Thank
Maybe
you
next time.
so much for taking the time.
This is fun. Thanks for having me.
Pat, is there any last questions? Any short questions?
Short questions. Do you have a favorite Tiny Desk concert since we just talked about it? Do you even watch
Yeah,
those,
the
or-
one that won. Oh man, what's her name? I should know her name. It was in 2016. Look up the one from 2016. It was this woman from, I think was it Minnesota, Milwaukee, somewhere there.
One of the M states.
Yeah,
Well, Milwaukee's a
somewhere where
city,
there's
but-
cheese and lakes.
It does narrow it down.
I mean, she played like it was just a haunting song, and she played like she sounds like just a tortured person who made this beautiful thing
Wow.
out of it. She played like I think it was like a viola or something. There's her and a viola,
Oh, wow.
and I think like a loop pedal or something like that.
Wow, cool.
It was amazing. I'll send it to you.
Awesome.
Yeah, that sounds
yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Well, thank you so much
Thank you.
for
Do you
taking
have
the
anything
time.
you'd like to shout out while we're here?
Shout out. I mean,
Yeah.
everything.
How can people get in contact with you? Maybe if they are interested in, some of your services.
Yeah, you can follow
recommend-
me on Instagram and like
So, like
update
Shards
that.
LV, I
Shards
think, or
LV is
something?
my at
Okay.
on everything. ShardsLV@gmail is my
Okay.
email address.
Awesome.
Hit me up. Let's do some stuff.
Hell yeah, dude. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
And thanks for watching.
And you can find us on all social media platforms on either Lab 212 or the Poorly Edited Podcast. We put all of our episodes that we air live on WXLV on YouTube after the fact a week later. So I don't know why you wouldn't know that because that's where you're watching this. So just stick around YouTube, I guess. Thank you so much for listening and watching.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
If I can do that when I'm 39, I can't do that now. Like I'll actually fall over.